All right, we are going live. I will introduce myself and then I'll introduce you.
Okay, that's great.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitton. I'm the executive director here at Westview Media. Thanks for tuning in to our latest City Talk conversation. Today's conversation is with Lisa Burnette from the Salt Lake City 911 Center. I'll have Lisa introduce herself in just a moment, but a couple of housekeeping items for those that are watching live on Facebook. Please submit your questions. We depend on audience questions to keep the conversation going. I have several pre-prepared questions, but we rely on those audience questions to keep the conversation going. With that, Lisa, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the position that you're in?
I would love to, and I appreciate, Turner, the opportunity to talk to everyone about Salt Lake City 911 and what we provide for the communities that we serve. So I started in Salt Lake City as a frontline call taker dispatcher back in 1992. I ended up getting my bachelor's degree from the University of Utah, and I was working on my master's degree in 2017. Let's see, 2018. I'm sorry. I ended up getting appointed to this position. My predecessor left, and I was very excited. My whole career has been spent with Salt Lake City. And so I just feel very fortunate to have the knowledge that I have and understand our community and be able to be one of those individuals who started from the ground up.
Well, that has to be somewhat unique as far as dispatchers go. I know that the work can be very difficult and very emotionally taxing, and just wondering how, if you had advice for folks that are starting out in a career like this, how have you been able to kind of manage and deal with all that stress and then continue to advance in rank?
And that's an excellent question. The job as a dispatcher is very stressful and it is very taxing. I think one of the biggest concerns is we never know the outcome. I mean, rarely do we know how a circumstance turned out, right? We don't talk to people when they're having the best day of their life. We're talking to people on the worst day of their life. We're trying to be the calm in the chaos, as they say. And so it's very, very important to work on your work-life balance and have an outlet for the stressors that you encounter with this job. If you don't have those types of tools in your toolbox, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be successful. And I think if you look at the statistics nationwide, dispatch centers on the whole are very short staffed. Salt Lake City 911 made the media for mandatory overtime back in 2018. And during that time, we had a lot of things going on with people resigning and, individuals just not on board with some of the processes that we had during that time. But I can tell you that 2020 has certainly taken its toll on our staff. It was funny because someone was talking to me saying, well, what do you think the biggest stressor was for 2020? And I said, well, we had the windstorms, right? We had so many calls because of the windstorms. And then we had the protests. And after that, we had the earthquake. And I knew there was another one, Turner, but I just couldn't remember what it was. And it was COVID. I totally, that was on everyone else's mind, but that wasn't the big stressor for me necessarily. I mean, we had figured out how to deal with COVID for our team back, in end of January, beginning of February. So for dispatchers, we're not able to social distance, and wearing masks is very difficult, especially for, individuals that are hard of hearing. And then we've got a mask on, and it's even more muffled. And our first responders, couldn't hear us. And so we've had to investigate and figure out the best masks for my staff, and installing the plexiglass and those sorts of things. So all in all, dispatching is a difficult job. It's actually in some ways thankless. You have to just remember that you are providing a necessary um, resource for our community. When someone is having the worst day of their life, it's just very important to remember that you're there for them, and that means that you're doing a world of good.
Well, and I just want to add a thank you to you and your team. My dad is career law enforcement, and he would speak all the time about how critical the dispatcher is, because the questions that you are asking, the information that you provide to a first responder really can be the difference between life and death for someone in, as you've said, the worst day of their life. So I think I'll transition a little bit. I may have gotten a little ahead of myself with the second question there, but I'm wondering, I know when I think of 911, I think, I'm having an emergency or something's going wrong. I'm going to call 911. Can you tell folks that are watching maybe what the back end of that looks like, and what all does 911 dispatch do? What kind of calls do you respond to? And kind of how does the process work on the back end?
So, and forgive me, Turner, too, if I jump around a little bit. But one of the most important things that I want members of the community to know is that Salt Lake City 911 is an anomaly, in that we don't work for Salt Lake City Police. We don't work for Salt Lake City Fire. We are our own department, and we provide dispatch and call taking services not only for Salt Lake City Police and Fire, but also for Sandy City Police and Fire. And that's, not a well-known fact, but that is something that we provide. And even though Sandy is not contiguous with Salt Lake City, we're very happy of our partnership with our Sandy City folks. So I wanted that information out there so that everyone knows. The second thing that I want people to know is, if you call 911, the person that answers the phone is also the same person that would answer a non-emergency call. So if you call 911, it gets priority, but each one of our call takers are set up in an automatic call distribution. So the call will actually drop to the call taker as soon as it hits the queue, and it drops to the next available call taker. And that goes for both 911 calls as well as our administrative lines. So people should call 911 if they want to stop a crime, report a fire, or save a life, right? Those are sort of the three standard reasons to call 911. But I also think it's important for people to know that if you're not sure if you should call 911, go ahead and call 911, because if you're not 100% sure, that means it's bordering on an emergent situation. And I don't want people to feel bad about calling 911 when they're not 100% sure, right? But I think it's also important to remember that if you have to wait on a non-emergency call for service, it's because our call takers are on 911 lines. So, and that's generally the reason, for the delay in a call answer on a non-emergent line. And so what's happening in the background is there's a tiered response, really, because we have a call taker that's actually triaging the caller and getting information. and then we're typing it into our computer aided dispatch software system. And then instantaneously, this goes to a dispatcher in a dispatch queue. And, a lot of people think that we decide, the dispatcher or the call taker decides, who we're going to send when. And that's not necessarily the case. We do it based on priorities. And the departments that we serve determine the priority level of the call. And then based on those priorities, we send the resources. So there are times when, members of the public have to wait, let's say, for a police response. That's only because there are other priorities ahead of theirs, right? So an active domestic call where we also have an individual who is calling to report, a problem with a manhole cover or something like that. They're going to respond to the in progress domestic call before they respond to the manhole cover, if that makes sense. And so our fire and medical calls are dispatched almost immediately. The fire departments that we provide services for have mutual and automatic aid agreements. And generally, when you call 911 for a fire and medical response, the response time is pretty quick because Salt Lake City and as well as Sandy City has these agreements that if they're busy, the next closest in, regardless of where they are in the county, can respond.
Thank you. And I'm just to ask a couple of follow-up clarifying questions. So let's say that someone calls 911 and your dispatchers have those list of priorities. How are those priorities determined? Are they set by each individual police department or is it the city council level?
No, it is the police department. But I can tell you that the dispatcher has some leeway. And what I mean by that is if we have an active domestic call, let's say, that call is a high priority. But now let's change the circumstance. Let's say that we have an active domestic call where one of the individuals now has a weapon. Okay. Even though a priority is set as a high priority on an active domestic call, my staff has the ability to say, now, wait a minute, there's a weapon involved and, there's a huge potential for the safety of the individuals that are on scene. We are going to raise the priority to the very top, let's say. So we have some leeway, but for the most part, call types and their priorities are determined by the departments that we serve.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to my next question. You've kind of covered this, but I just want to put a little bit of a fine point on it. How does 911 work with, say, the Salt Lake City Fire Department and the Salt Lake City Police Department? What does that relationship look like?
So we have a very good working relationship with Salt Lake City Police and Salt Lake City Fire, and we work hand in hand with them. I meet with Chief Brown and Chief Lieb once a month, and we go over any concerns perhaps that they have with the dispatch services that we provide. And we, if we have a concern from the dispatcher's point of view, we address those things. And they also, these meetings also help keep everyone apprised of the latest, greatest thing that's going on. So an example would be recently, we were able to integrate a software program called Rapid SOS with our computer here in the dispatch office. And it's a free software. And what this software does is it works intricately with Google devices and iPhones, Androids, and it's a location identification service. So if you call 911 and you're having an asthma attack. And the very first question that we ask when someone calls 911 is, what is the address of the emergency? Because in the event that we were to lose you for some reason, if your cell phone ran out of battery or whatever, the connection was bad, at least we have an address to send resources, right? So in this particular instance, if an individual, let's say, is having an asthma attack, or it's a child who their mother or father has collapsed and they don't know their address, or there's a host of other reasons, right? We can actually put the phone number into this software and it will give us a location based on a certainty, and it'll say a 95% certainty and or a 90% certainty, but that gives us a place to start, right? And this is incredible, groundbreaking software, because when I first started 30 years ago, when you were having an asthma attack, I would have to wait with you on the phone and, for 30 minutes or more, trying to, for an individual who's having a difficult time breathing, trying to get out the numbers or the letters of actually where they were. And so with new technology constantly on the horizon all the time, these are things that we talk to our other public safety partners about, and some of the good things that we can do for our communities, these advancements. Another thing that's so important for me personally, as the leader of this organization, is customer service. I realize that people are calling us on the worst day of their life. And I also know that they're not necessarily they're under so much stress. And it's very important to me to have staff that are compassionate, and yet they're efficient, because it's call after call after call. To give you an idea, between Sandy and Salt Lake City, for police and fire departments, for calendar year of 2020, those agencies combined took probably between 375,000 and 400,000 cases. But Salt Lake City 911 processed over almost 800,000 calls. That's more than half of what the caseload was for these departments. And so that is, for me personally, that's a huge tell, right? It's telling me that, if you're traveling on I-15 and you're calling 911 because you've just witnessed a mattress in the roadway, and it hits a cell tower and it happens to come to Salt Lake City, my staff is processing that call and getting the information to Highway Patrol for you, so that, we can make sure that no one gets hurt because of that mattress. So it's really important that everyone knows that not only are we answering calls for service and doing follow-up calls, but there are times when other agencies' calls hit our cell towers and we're getting those calls as well.
Well, thank you. That's illuminating to me. I can't imagine that volume of call. The next question that I have for you, and you kind of addressed this at the beginning, but want to give you an opportunity to reiterate that. What is the most important takeaway for viewers to have about your organization?
So I think it's so important that everyone know that, first and foremost, that we are our own department. We have individuals who are at times unhappy, perhaps with having to wait, or the services that they received from a responder, and unfortunately they take it out on our staff. They take their frustrations out on our staff, and when I say that it's unfortunate, it takes its mental toll on my staff as well. An example, we had an incident that occurred in Salt Lake City several years ago, and we had individuals calling from all over the world expressing their frustration and threatening my staff because of this incident. And my staff was not involved in the incident. My staff, the only thing that we did was answer a call and send responders. And, I don't think people understand that. I think they think that we are the first line in, other organizations, and we're not. I would just hope that my staff remains compassionate, and I just hope that our community members understand that the people that work at Salt Lake City 911 are incredible. They're amazing. And unfortunately, 2020, we lost a significant amount of staff members because of the stress. So it's not just, law enforcement agencies across the nation and fire departments across the nation, but it's also taking its toll directly on, 911 centers across the nation.
Well, thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate my appreciation for the work that you and your staff do. My next question is about the priorities or projects that Salt Lake City 911 is working on. Are there any things, new policies, new procedures, or projects coming down the pike that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, and I'm really excited that you asked this one. So back in 2016, the county decided that, and the city was an integral part in this, we all decided that it would be wonderful for public safety to have the same systems in place, to have the same computer, and to have workflows that are very similar. And I think one of the things that brought that home was some of the recent officer-involved shootings where I was able to go to unified police dispatch and actually work for an officer that was shot in the line of duty. I was able to work as a dispatcher at their center because we were all on the same CAD. We were all on the same computer. And so I knew how to dispatch and use the functions of that software. Well, luckily, we are bringing all of the county agencies on. So in September 29th of 2020, we brought all of the other county fire agencies onto the same CAD. So the reason why this is so important is because, as I talked about, when someone calls 911 and they're hitting a cell tower because they're mobile and they're reporting a field fire, let's say, I don't have to transfer you anywhere. I can actually take your call, process it. It's geo-validated. It's GIS based on the location that you give us, and it pops instantaneously into the queue of the dispatch center that needs to dispatch resources. So gone are the days of me having to transfer you on a fire or a medical case, right? And so we're in the process now of bringing on all of the county police agencies as well. And we're hoping that by first quarter of 2022, that the all of the county will be on the same computer. And Salt Lake City Department of Airports is also on the same computer system. So we will be able to share resources a lot faster. We can eliminate the transfers. We can actually provide members of the public with the best and fastest service. And that was the ultimate goal. So we're very proud of that.
Thank you. My next question is, if this is kind of taking it to a little bit of a much higher level, but I'm just wondering if you could share, you mentioned customer service, but your overall philosophy or approach to the work that you do as the director.
So the thing that my staff will tell you about me is I believe in a servant leadership philosophy. So while I'm the director of my department, I work for my employees. Now you may think, well, no, not really, because taxpayers pay your salary. You really work for the taxpayers. My staff works for the taxpayers. That's why I have to make sure that my staff has everything that they need to do the very best job and provide the very best service to our community members. And so if my administrative team makes sure that my staff has everything that they need, they're going to pass on that compassion and that great customer service to our community members. And at the end of the day, that is the goal. I want to make sure that our community knows that Salt Lake City 911 loves them, that we are sending a virtual hug to them, because 2020 was such a trying year. It wasn't just a trying year for us, it was a trying year for our callers. We really, that sort of was hammered home for us, because we get a lot of individuals who are having, some type of mental health concern. And we have individuals that will call us 10 times a day. And the reason why they're calling is just to make sure that we're still there, that we're answering the phone. We're on a first name basis with some of these people. And we'll talk to them and just make sure that they don't have any type of emergency, or if they do and they're just they want to talk to someone, we get them connected with the University of Utah crisis line. um, we just care about the members of our community so much.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to give you a break for just a second because I've asked you, I think, 8 questions in pretty rapid succession. And just remind folks that are watching live that if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're running toward the end of my questions. So if you've been sitting on one, make sure you get it in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. My next question, and this can be, feel free to build on this however you'd like, but can you share a story of success or something that inspired you about your work with Salt Lake City 911?
Sure. So honestly, I just feel like we've got so many success stories. And it's not just me. I think part of our success, or the inspiration that I get from my work with the city, is just seeing how capable and efficient my staff is. I have an amazing admin team. Our frontline call takers and dispatchers truly are incredible, and they inspire me every day. There are times when the director has a lot of things on their plate. I'm sure every department in the city has that. And with 911, it encompasses so many things: technology changes and staffing changes and mental health change. All of these are challenges in their own right, but they're changing too, right? And so my staff actually lifts me up. I'll go out on the dispatch floor and they'll say, "Hey, Lisa, let me tell you about this call I just took," or, something funny that happened, or, how they were able to make someone's day, and a bad situation had a positive outcome, right? I can remember, early in my career, I took a call from an individual who, it was on Christmas Eve, and the only thing he said, the very first question was, "What is the address of the emergency?" And he said, "This is my address, this is my name, this is my phone number. I'm going to kill myself now." And he pulled the trigger. I mean, it wasn't even time to interject a question, or "No, please don't," or any of those things, right? And I think the inspiration from that type of call, because it was such a traumatic event for me personally was that after the officers had responded and the fire department had responded, they actually came up and talked to me and said, there really was nothing that you could have done in this circumstance. And they gave me the backstory because I was a newer employee and they were looking at trying to retain me. I mean, that's how you have to save your dispatchers. I mean, you have to engage with them and make sure that they understand that they are so valuable. They're not only valuable to the city and to our residents and our first responders, but they're valuable to our occupation. I'm terrified that in my lifetime we are going to have some type of artificial intelligence where you call 911 and you push a button if it's medical, and the triage is from a recorded voice. I that is, just so that that's on the horizon. I don't want us to ever have to go there, but I could totally see that happening in my lifetime if we don't have a way to not only retain our current staff members, but recruit new people, right? And so those are the things that I am constantly looking for, these new ideas, and, talking with my staff to ensure that they know that they inspire me, and I hope that I can inspire them.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And to build on what you said about the need to support and retain dispatchers, is there something that the public can do? What can I do, as Joe Public out here? How can I support you and your dispatchers?
I think it's a good question, Turner. And one thing that would actually help is, and I play this game sometimes, if I'm taking a walk, or if I'm on the freeway, or wherever I am, I play this game where if I had to call 911, where would I be able to tell them that I am? Right. And so I think that a lot of times just having people um, know their location, know just the basics. What's your address? What's your phone number? What's your name? If we just have, people memorize that information or educate their children and, just practice those things, I think it would actually make our job, so much easier. While the technology and the software is now out there to help us locate people much better than, 30 years ago, it's still an important learning lesson, I think, for all of us, is to remain calm and know our location.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't see any audience questions, so I'm going to transition to my final question for you, which is there a question I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you today?
It's funny. I'm not so sure that we didn't cover a lot. I want everyone to know that 911 is constantly evolving. Not only me, but our team is constantly looking at best practices um, and what we can do better. And every year, Salt Lake City 911 has to fill out a minimum standards and best practices performance card for the state of Utah. And I'm just so happy to say that this past year we were at 100%. It's not just answering the call, right? But we're also held to a higher standard. We're held to the National Emergency Number Association sets parameters on call answer times. And then recently there was a legislative audit that shows that, we haven't always answered our calls in the amount of time that we're allotted through these national standards. But for the last 3 years, we've met those obligations above and beyond. And that is amazing considering the call volume that we have. Matrix Auditing did an audit on our dispatch center 2 years ago, and the members of the public that were interviewed based on customer service scores and our first responders and those sorts of things, we received high marks. And I'm very proud of that. I mean, that was not an easy feat, but I think that the more our community members realize that Salt Lake City 911 is not a part of any department but our own, and that we can't dictate the resources, we're not forgetting about anyone. We still have their call, and we believe that every call is important. I really want to make sure that everyone knows that.
Well, I think that is a very good way to end, and I really have appreciated our time together today. And I really appreciate, I want to go back to what you said at the very beginning, which that you've spent 30 years in service to the city and to our community. And I just want to thank you for sticking it out and for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Turner. And let me just reiterate, it isn't me. I'm nothing without my team. They are amazing.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye, Lisa.
Bye-bye.